The heavy oak door swung inward with a familiar groan. I stepped into the boardroom, the scent of stale coffee and expensive cologne hitting me like a physical blow. My eyes immediately found her. Miranda. Standing by the head of the long mahogany table, schmoozing Mr. Harrison, our biggest potential client. And then I saw it. The blouse. Cyan silk. I'd seen this exact scene before, right down to the cyan blouse she wore when she stabbed me in the back the first time. Déjà vu wasn't strong enough a word. This was a replay. 5 years ago, this same meeting, this same client, this same betrayal had been the first nail in my company's coffin. This time, however, things were different. I smoothed the lapels of my bespoke suit, a quiet statement of the success I'd already rebuilt using the knowledge this second chance afforded me. Wealth wasn't just money. It was armor. Calmly, I walked forward, my heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Miranda turned, a practiced smile plastered on her face, but her eyes flickered. Surprise? Annoyance? It didn't matter. I offered a polite nod to Mr. Harrison and took my usual seat, directly opposite her. Inside, my mind was racing, calculating angles, plotting countermoves. Outside, I was the picture of composure. Let the games begin. Again. 5 years. It felt like a lifetime ago, and yet the memory was still raw, sharp as broken glass. My first tech startup, Innovate, was my baby. We were on the cusp of something huge, a revolutionary software poised to disrupt the industry. Miranda, my best friend since college, my confidant, my right hand. She'd been there from the start. Or so I thought. The betrayal hadn't been a single stab, but 1,000 paper cuts. Leaked data, stolen concepts presented as her own. Quiet whispers to investors painting me as unstable, erratic. While I scrambled, pouring my life savings, my parents' retirement fund, everything I had into keeping Innovate afloat, Miranda was on magazine covers, hailed as a visionary. My success, she told reporters with feigned modesty, had been just luck. The day I stood before the judge, declaring bankruptcy, was the lowest point of my life. Losing the company was like losing a limb. Watching Miranda launch her own company, built on the foundations of my stolen ideas, felt like salt in the wound. She soared. I crashed. Then came the incident. A freak accident? A desperate moment pushed too far? The details remained hazy, shrouded in the fog of pain and unconsciousness. All I knew was darkness, then a sudden jolting return. Not to a hospital bed, but to my old apartment 5 years in the past. The morning sun streaming through the window, the date on my phone confirming the impossible. I had come back. Waking up 5 years in the past, with every memory of the future intact, was disorienting. At first, I thought I was dreaming, or worse, losing my mind. Panic clawed at my throat. But as the hours passed, the memories stayed sharp, undeniable. The stock market shifts, the winning lottery numbers, if only I played. The rise and fall of companies, the betrayals, especially the betrayals. Disbelief slowly gave way to a chilling realization. This was a second chance. Not just to rebuild, but to reclaim. My first decision was strategic, cold. I wouldn't stop every bad thing from happening. Some events, some initial betrayals, needed to play out. Let Miranda think she was winning. Let the others reveal their true colors. I'd just be better prepared this time. I reached out to Sam, my former assistant. In the original timeline, she'd stayed loyal the longest, her quiet suspicions about Miranda growing but never voiced loudly enough. This time, I brought her into my confidence early. Her gasp of disbelief mirrored my own initial reaction, but her loyalty, once proven, was absolute. My new life required a new base of operations, far from the shared spaces and memories of the first timeline. I found a minimalist penthouse apartment overlooking the city. My home office was my sanctuary. Cool marble surfaces under my fingertips, the subtle, calming scent of sandalwood incense, the quiet hum of state-of-the-art tech. Here, bathed in the dawn light, I wasn't the impulsive, trusting fool I once was. I was calculated, patient, determined. Revenge, I decided, was a dish best served cold, and I had 5 years of deep-freeze memories to draw upon. A week later, Miranda sought me out at an industry gala. She glided towards me, dripping false warmth, that familiar designer perfume, a scent that now triggered a knot of wariness in my stomach, preceding her. "Darling, so good to see you," she gushed, air-kissing near my cheek. "We simply must catch up properly. How about dinner next Tuesday? Remember that little Italian place we loved near the old office?" The bait was cast. That restaurant was where she'd first laid the groundwork for stealing the Harrison deal 5 years ago, subtly poisoning my relationship with Victor, my mentor, over pasta and wine. I gave her a slow smile, letting my eyes linger just a fraction too long. "Dinner sounds interesting, Miranda, but are you sure you want to dredge up the past?" A flicker of unease crossed her features. Her fingers started their telltale tapping against her clutch, a nervous tick I'd never registered in my first life. Her left eye gave a minuscule twitch. Bingo. Just then, Victor materialized beside her, his hand resting possessively on her arm. Victor Martel, the man who'd taught me almost everything I knew, the father figure I'd trusted implicitly, the man who, as I now knew, had been feeding Miranda information for months, driven by petty resentment and hidden gambling debts. He offered me a smooth, avuncular smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good to see you thriving," he said, his tone implying my success was somehow unexpected. "Likewise, Victor," I replied, my voice even. "Tuesday dinner it is, Miranda. Looking forward to it." As I watched her walk away, clinging to Victor's arm, I touched the tiny recording device nestled discreetly in my pocket. This time, I'd have evidence of exactly what she planned to do. Miranda and I met in college, Econ 101. We bonded instantly over late-night study sessions fueled by cheap coffee and ambitious dreams. We were going to conquer the world together. Our first joint venture, a campus tutoring service, was a small success, but it planted the seed. We complemented each other. My innovative ideas, her knack for marketing and networking. For years, the friendship felt genuine, unbreakable. We shared apartments, secrets, celebratory pizzas, and panicked all-nighters building our first real business plan over countless cups of bitter espresso in a dingy campus cafe. Looking back now, with the clarity of hindsight, the warning signs were there. A subtle barb disguised as a joke when I landed a key investor she'd also courted. A possessiveness over shared contacts. A flicker of something cold in her eyes when our first product received rave reviews, primarily crediting my design. I'd brushed it off, blinded by loyalty and the shared history I cherished. I remembered our first major success party, landing a significant seed funding round. Amidst the cheap champagne and cheering friends, I saw her standing slightly apart, her smile tight, her eyes holding a barely concealed resentment that chilled me even then. I'd pushed the feeling down, telling myself it was stress, or maybe I was imagining things. But the truth, now unavoidable, was that her ambition had curdled into jealousy long before the final betrayal. Her signature perfume, once a scent I associated with shared triumphs, now just smelled like deception. She hadn't just betrayed me 5 years ago. She'd been systematically undermining me for years, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Victor Martel. He wasn't just a mentor, He was practically family. He'd taken me under his wing when I was just starting out, a wide-eyed intern in the cutthroat world of tech startups. He taught me the ropes, introduced me to key players, celebrated my wins, and offered gruff but solid advice during setbacks. I trusted him completely, relied on his wisdom. Even after the rebirth, that ingrained trust was hard to shake. It felt like betraying a father figure to suspect him. But the future memories were stark. Victor feeding Miranda confidential information, strategic advice on how to undercut me, introductions to his contacts behind my back. Why? Resentment, pure and simple. He'd been a respected figure, but never quite reached the pinnacle. Seeing his protege, me, surpass him, achieving the kind of disruptive success he'd only dreamed of, had eaten away at him. His quiet pride had morphed into bitter envy. I remembered a specific meeting years ago, a teaching moment, he'd called it. We were reviewing a crucial pitch deck. He'd suggested rearranging key data points, framing our projections in a slightly more conservative light. Always under-promise and over-deliver, he'd advised sagely. At the time, it seemed like sound advice. Now I realized it was subtle sabotage, designed to make my proposal seem less impressive compared to the one Miranda would eventually present, using data he likely provided her. The final piece clicked into place when Sam, my loyal assistant, doing some discreet digging at my request, uncovered evidence of Victor's mounting financial troubles in the months leading up to the original betrayal. Gambling debts, whispers of failed high-risk investments. He wasn't just envious, he was desperate. Miranda likely offered him a way out, a cut of the profits from the company she planned to build on my ashes. Last night, sorting through old digital files I'd backed up, files I hadn't bothered with in my first timeline, I found it. An encrypted ledger buried deep in a shared project folder from years before the main betrayal. It detailed small, regular payments from a shell corporation linked to one of our early suppliers, directly into an offshore account Victor controlled. Kickbacks. He'd been skimming long before Miranda even entered the picture. The betrayal ran deeper than I ever imagined. The web of deceit wasn't woven by just two pairs of hands. My own sister Emma played her part. Younger, perpetually feeling overshadowed, Emma craved the spotlight, the easy success she saw Miranda flaunting. Miranda had preyed on that insecurity, flattering her, promising her a role, a title, influence. Emma, blinded by resentment and Miranda's charm, had foolishly leaked details about our family's investment portfolio, giving Miranda leverage I never knew she had. The familiar scent of Emma's lilac shampoo, once comforting, now made my stomach churn with a sickening mix of anger and pity. Then there was David Chen, my CFO. Sharp, meticulous, trusted, and, as I now knew, utterly compromised. He and Miranda had been having an affair for months before the collapse. Love, or perhaps just ambition disguised as romance, had blinded him. He'd helped her manipulate the financials, making Innovate appear weaker than it was, paving the way for her narrative of my incompetence. I remembered his constant, nervous pen-clicking during tense meetings, a habit I'd dismissed as stress. Now I recognized it as the tell of a man drowning in guilt and lies. Add to them a handful of industry rivals, eager to see me fall, who quietly allied with Miranda, sharing rumors and blocking opportunities. My apartment wall, usually adorned with abstract art, was now covered in a sprawling, complex map. Photos, names, dates, connecting lines drawn in red ink, a comprehensive visualization of the betrayals that had brought me down, seeing it all laid out. It wasn't just about Miranda and Victor anymore. It was a conspiracy. Our industry disruptive consumer tech was a shark tank disguised as a playground. Fortunes were made and lost overnight on the back of a single innovative idea or a well-timed market shift. The air in the gleaming glass and steel towers hummed with ruthless ambition. Networking events were minefields of fake smiles and calculating eyes, the artificial warmth barely masking the desperation. The constant fluorescent hum in most offices felt designed to induce tension headaches. Power players shifted allegiances like weather vanes, always sniffing out the next big thing, ready to backstab their closest allies for a competitive edge. My revolutionary idea, the one Miranda stole, was an AI-driven personalization engine. Codenamed Nexus, it promised to change how consumers interacted with digital platforms, learning and adapting in real time with unprecedented accuracy. It was complex, potentially paradigm-shifting, and incredibly valuable. Everyone wanted a piece of it, or failing that, to tear it down before it could dominate the market. In my first timeline, I navigated this world with naive optimism. This time I understood the hidden currents, the unspoken rules, the precise leverage points. I knew who really held the power, whose whispers mattered, and whose threats were empty bluster. And I knew exactly where and when the final fatal blow was intended to land, the annual Tech Innovation Summit, during my keynote address. That was where Miranda and Victor planned to unveil their version of Nexus, backed by doctored evidence suggesting I'd stolen the core concept from them. What was the spark? The single grain of sand that started the avalanche? It was almost laughable in its simplicity. After securing a major Series A funding round for Innovate, a round Miranda felt she deserved more credit for. I'd innocently mentioned in a team meeting that I was considering bringing in an experienced COO to help scale operations. I hadn't named anyone, hadn't made a decision. It was just a thought, a reflection on managing rapid growth. But Miranda, already simmering with jealousy and insecurity, heard something else entirely. She heard a threat. She saw me consolidating power, potentially sidelining her. Her ambition, coupled with Victor's poisonous whispers fanning the flames of her resentment, twisted my casual remark into a deliberate slight, proof that I didn't value her contributions. My success wasn't inspiring her. It was diminishing her self-image. That single, misinterpreted comment became her justification, the catalyst that solidified her resolve to take what she felt was rightfully hers. As I traced the lines on my betrayal map, a cold clarity settled over me. I could intervene now. I could expose Miranda's early manipulations, warn Victor about the consequences, perhaps even salvage the friendship with my sister. I could prevent the worst of the fallout, but the thought vanished as quickly as it came. Prevention wasn't the goal anymore. Watching them squirm, watching them face the consequences of their choices, that was the goal. I could warn her, save her from herself. But why deprive her of the consequences she so richly deserved? Punishment felt far more satisfying than prevention. It started, just like before, with Harrison Automotive. They were our flagship potential client for Nexus, the big fish that would validate everything. And right on schedule, Miranda made her move. I received a forwarded email chain accidentally sent by a junior staffer Miranda often used for plausible deniability, detailing her private meeting with Mr. Harrison's team, subtly undermining my proposal, highlighting non-existent flaws, and positioning her nascent company as a more stable, focused alternative. I let the charade play out. At our next joint pitch meeting with Harrison, I feigned ignorance. I presented Nexus with passion, just as I had the first time. Then, Miranda chimed in, her voice laced with faux concern. "While the core concept is brilliant," she began, echoing lines I remembered with chilling accuracy, "we do have some concerns about the scalability and the potential integration challenges." She laid out her alternative, essentially a watered-down, poorly copied version of Nexus, presented with slides suspiciously similar to my own early drafts. Harrison's team looked troubled, glancing between us. Miranda shot me a look of smug certainty, convinced I was still the trusting fool she remembered. I felt the metallic taste of adrenaline in my mouth, the familiar burn of betrayal rising in my chest. But I forced it down, channeling it into cold resolve. The client's overpowering cologne filled the room, a cheap scent trying to mask the stench of deception. I let my shoulders slump slightly, offered a tight, strained smile. "These are valid points to consider, Mr. Harrison. Perhaps we need to reassess." I appeared to concede defeat. As the meeting concluded, Miranda practically glowed with triumph. She didn't see me discreetly tap my phone, activating the high-quality audio recording app I'd running throughout the entire session. Phase 1 complete. Publicly, I accepted the Harrison setback with a quiet grace that seemed to genuinely confuse Miranda. No angry outbursts, no accusations. Just a carefully worded internal memo about reevaluating our strategic focus and learning from client feedback. I projected an image of vulnerability, of a leader perhaps overwhelmed by the pressure. This was calculated. I knew Miranda's ego. Give her an inch of perceived weakness, and she'd take a mile, becoming bolder, sloppier. My team, unaware of the full picture yet, grew concerned. Whispers followed me down the hall. Sam fielded anxious questions, sticking to the script I'd given her. "He's just processing," she'd say vaguely. "He needs some space." While appearing to focus on smaller, unrelated projects, refining internal processes, exploring tangential markets, my real work happened behind closed doors, late at night. I scheduled a lunch with Victor, ostensibly to seek his counsel on the Harrison situation. Over expensive steaks, I played the part of the wounded protégé. "I just don't understand where it went wrong, Victor." Miranda seemed almost happy about it. I watched him shift uncomfortably. "Perhaps," I mused, swirling my wine. "She feels ready to step out on her own? Maybe she sees this as her opportunity?" I planted the seed, a tiny sliver of doubt about his accomplice's loyalty, designed to prey on his own insecurities. He left the lunch looking thoughtful, perhaps a little worried. My apparent resignation was the perfect cover. Just as I was reviewing the recordings from the Harrison meeting later that evening, my phone buzzed. An encrypted message from an unknown number. It was short, cryptic. "Miranda's partner, need to talk. Urgent info, Harrison deal financing, she's lying to you. And to him." The hook had been baited. Now someone else was starting to bite. Leveraging my knowledge of the future wasn't just about knowing what Miranda would do, but how. I remembered the specific venture capital firm she'd eventually secured funding from in the original timeline, a firm known for its aggressive due diligence, but also for a particular blind spot regarding international regulatory compliance, something Miranda had exploited. Her business plan, while superficially impressive, contained fraudulent projections about European market penetration, promising results based on regulatory loopholes I knew would be closed within 6 months. First, I arranged a discreet, off-the-record coffee meeting with Mr. Harrison himself. No pitch, no pressure. Just a friendly chat where I casually mentioned my concerns about long-term viability in the European market due to upcoming regulatory shifts, backing it up with anonymized, publicly available data projections he hadn't seen. I didn't mention Miranda, just presented the facts. His expression turned thoughtful. Next, using a series of shell corporations I'd established months ago for this very purpose, I made a strategic, anonymous investment in a small, competing tech firm that happened to be seeking funding from the same VC firm Miranda was targeting. My investment came with specific conditions blocking the VC from funding any directly competing personalization engine technology for 18 months. Miranda's funding pipeline was now quietly choked off, and she wouldn't know why or by whom. Simultaneously, I compiled a package. Recordings of Miranda bad-mouthing Harrison's team, evidence of her misrepresenting data in the pitch meeting, and a carefully researched report on the potential ethical and regulatory violations related to her exaggerated European market claims. This package was anonymously delivered to the relevant international regulatory bodies and, more importantly, leaked discreetly to a key journalist known for breaking tech industry scandals. Finally, I reached out to Liam, Miranda's most trusted lieutenant in her new venture. I knew from the original timeline that Miranda would eventually betray Liam, too, cutting him out once the company stabilized. I met him secretly, offered him a significantly better position at my real company, the one I was building quietly, separate from the struggling public face, and hinted at Miranda's instability and questionable promises. I showed him just enough evidence of her duplicity regarding the Harrison deal to plant serious doubts. He was hesitant, but the seed was sown. From my penthouse window, overlooking the city lights, I felt a grim satisfaction. The first domino was teetering. The fallout was swift and brutal. An influential tech blog published an exposé hinting at ethical questions surrounding Miranda's fundraising efforts and potential misrepresentations made to key clients, citing anonymous sources. Within hours, Harrison Automotive publicly announced they were pausing considerations with Miranda's company, citing due diligence concerns. The VC firm quietly withdrew its tentative offer sheet. Miranda's panicked call came late that night. Her voice was tight, strained. "Did you see that article? It's lies! Someone's trying to sabotage me! You have to help me figure out who—" I listened patiently, injecting just the right amount of surprised sympathy into my voice. "That sounds awful, Miranda. Of course, I'll help however I can. Industry rumors can be vicious." Inside, I smiled. News travels fast in our world. Victor started subtly distancing himself, his calls becoming less frequent, his public mentions of Miranda non-existent. He could smell the blood in the water, whispers about Miranda's shady practices and overblown hype spread like wildfire at industry events. My own team, seeing my calm, measured response, offering public, non-committal sympathy for Miranda's unfortunate challenges, started looking at me with newfound respect, sensing a strength they hadn't seen before. Then, she appeared at my office door, unannounced. Gone was the smug confidence, replaced by a desperate edge. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usual immaculate composure frayed. "I know we've had our differences," she stammered, twisting her hands. "But you're the only one who understands this market, the only one with the connections to fight back. You have to help me fix this." She stood there, in my office, the picture of desperation, the powerful Miranda reduced to begging. It was a heady feeling, a potent first taste of revenge. I savored the reversal, the sheer, delicious irony of her coming to me. But I kept my expression carefully neutral, concerned even. "Miranda, this is serious," I said gravely. "Sabotage attempts, funding falling through, it's a mess." "I know. That's why I need your help, your strategic mind, your connections." Her voice trailed off. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. I might be able to make some quiet inquiries, perhaps leverage a contact or two to smooth things over with Harrison, but it would require absolute transparency from you. Full access to your financials, your investor communications, everything. And, I added, letting the pause hang, it would require you to put your current project on hold indefinitely and issue a public clarification regarding the misunderstandings in your initial pitch. The conditions were impossible, designed to cripple her further while giving me full access to her vulnerable operation. I saw the conflict in her eyes, the humiliation warring with desperation. The slight tremble in her usually steady hands was unmistakable. The expensive designer perfume she wore seemed faded, overshadowed by the sharp, metallic scent of fear sweat. Finally, reluctantly, she nodded. "Okay, anything, just help me." She left, clinging to a sliver of false hope I had deliberately manufactured. As the door closed behind her, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. The first piece was in place. She'd come begging twice more before I was done. Miranda, surprisingly resilient or perhaps just desperate, didn't stay down for long. The Harrison deal was dead, and her funding was stalled, but she still had my core Nexus technology, albeit a flawed copy. Shifting gears, she targeted my newest public-facing project, a smaller, legitimate software initiative I'd launched as part of my vulnerable persona. This time, the sabotage attempt was more direct and closer to home. My sister, Emma. Sam intercepted emails between them. Miranda, playing on Emma's desire for validation, convinced her to borrow some preliminary code snippets and market research data from my new project, promising Emma a senior position and public credit once Miranda adapted it for her own use. Simultaneously, I discovered Victor and Miranda huddled in a corner at another industry event. My enhanced hearing, thanks to a discreet audio amplifier app, picking up fragments of their conversation. "Release the doctored financials. Discredit him completely. No one will trust them again." They were planning to leak fabricated documents suggesting my new venture was failing, built on shaky foundations. The final straw? Finding a tiny, sophisticated surveillance device hidden inside a gifted pen on my desk. The acrid smell of burnt plastic when Sam's sweep detected it, followed by the sour taste of the expensive wine Miranda had brought over the previous week as a peace offering, confirmed everything. They were escalating. Time for Act 2 of the vulnerability play. I needed Miranda and Victor to feel confident, overeager. I started dropping hints of being distracted, stressed by personal matters. Vague enough to be believable. I let slip to a usually gossipy mid-level manager about cash flow concerns related to the new project, knowing it would get back to Miranda. Then the bait. I arranged a lunch with Emma. Playing the part of the overwhelmed older sibling, I sighed. This new project, it's tougher than I thought. The projections aren't quite hitting, and frankly, the main development account is looking a little thin. I casually mentioned a specific account number, letting her see a confidential printout I just happened to have with me, showing a modest, struggling balance. I knew Emma, torn but still susceptible to Miranda's influence, would relay this information. She looked guilty, sympathetic, conflicted, perfect. My public appearances became less frequent. Rumors circulated that my new venture was struggling, confirming the narrative I was carefully crafting. When Miranda called, fishing for information under the guise of concern, I sounded weary, wounded, but not suspicious. The bank statement I left accidentally visible on my desk during a brief strained meeting with Victor was the final piece of bait. The account number was real, the routing info correct, but the balance and transaction history? Entirely fabricated, a digital honeypot waiting for a greedy bee. The trap was intricate, relying on my foreknowledge of their personalities and predicted actions. While projecting weakness, I was moving decisively in the shadows. More secret meetings with regulatory bodies, this time providing irrefutable proof of Miranda's attempts to use stolen code, thanks to digital watermarks I'd embedded, and Victor's undeclared conflict of interest in advising both her and competitor firms he held shares in. I anonymously tipped off Victor's other major clients about his precarious financial situation and potential ethical breaches, providing just enough evidence to make them nervous. The manipulation of Emma required a delicate touch. Not direct confrontation, but strategic information. I arranged for her to accidentally overhear a staged conversation where one of my loyal team members recounted Miranda mocking Emma's intelligence and ambition, calling her a useful idiot. The effect was immediate. Emma's guilt turned to fury. The centerpiece of the trap involved the fabricated bank account. Knowing Miranda's desperation and Victor's greed, I anticipated they wouldn't resist the urge to exploit this perceived weakness. I set up a dummy investment opportunity, leaked through a compromised channel they trusted, appearing incredibly lucrative but requiring a fast, substantial wire transfer from my supposedly struggling company account, an account they now believed they could access or manipulate due to the information gleaned from Emma and the planted statement. I made sure the transfer required multi-factor authentication linked, cleverly, not to my devices, but routed through a temporary anonymized protocol that would ping Miranda's known secondary device for final authorization, disguised as a routine security verification for her own company's accounts. Late Friday afternoon, Sam brought me the confirmation message, her eyes wide. "Sir," she whispered, handing me the tablet. "The wire transfer was authorized using Miss Miranda's credentials exactly as you predicted. $1.5 million routed through the dummy corp. Checkmate." The news broke Monday morning. Not just Harrison pulling out, but a full-blown federal investigation into Miranda's company for financial irregularities, securities fraud, and potential intellectual property theft. The doctored financials she and Victor planned to leak, now evidence against them. The unauthorized wire transfer. The smoking gun, traced directly to her credentials. Victor went into full panic mode. He issued a public statement severing all ties with Miranda, claiming he was shocked and appalled by her actions, while privately shredding documents and trying to liquidate assets. It was too late. His other clients, already spooked by the anonymous tips, dropped him en masse. Emma, enraged and guilt-ridden, confronted Miranda in a tearful, screaming match that echoed through Miranda's half-empty office building, a confrontation Sam managed to discreetly record. Their alliance shattered spectacularly. Miranda's few remaining business partners and investors scrambled for the exits, desperate to avoid being tainted by the rapidly expanding scandal. The industry watched, fascinated and horrified, as Miranda's carefully constructed empire crumbled into dust. That night, my doorbell rang incessantly. It was Miranda. Rain-soaked, hair plastered to her face, mascara running, stripped of all her usual defenses. She looked broken. "You have to help me," she sobbed, leaning against the doorframe for support. "Everything's falling apart, and I don't know why. It's like someone planned all this." Her eyes searched mine, a dawning, terrifying suspicion flickering within them. Her breakdown on my doorstep was almost pitiful. Almost. She wept, pleaded, confessed fragments of her deceit, not out of remorse but out of sheer terror. "I don't understand how this is happening. It's like a curse." I let her cry, offering tissues and platitudes, my face a mask of concerned sympathy. Inside, the cold satisfaction was immense. This was the second begging, right on schedule. Maybe if I give you shares," she offered desperately. "A controlling interest in my company? Just make the investigation go away. You have connections, I know you do." She was offering me the keys to her sinking ship, a ship I had already torpedoed. I pretended to deliberate, pacing my living room. "Miranda, the situation is complex. Fraud investigations, federal involvement, these things have momentum." I paused, letting her hang on my every word. "I can consider my options, see if any of my legal contacts have insights, but I make no promises." For a fleeting second, seeing the raw desperation in her eyes, a flicker of the old friendship, the shared history, almost made me want to tell her. "I know, Miranda. I know everything. because I lived this already. But I crushed the impulse. Mercy wasn't part of the plan. I turned back to her, my expression carefully arranged into one of regretful reluctance. "I've thought about it, Miranda," I said softly, meeting her gaze. "And I'm sorry. I wish I could help, truly. But you've made some decisions, some choices, that I simply can't fix." The flicker of hope in her eyes died, replaced by utter despair. Cornered, broke, and facing potential prison time, Miranda did the only thing she had left. She lashed out. She called a press conference. Standing shaky but defiant before a handful of reporters, she launched a final, reckless attack, not on my business, but on me. "His success?" she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "It's nothing but luck and privilege. He inherited connections. He stumbled into opportunities. He built his current company by stepping on people, betraying trust. It was a desperate, transparent projection of her own actions." To my surprise, Victor stood beside her, a ghost of his former self. Fed lies by Miranda that I was somehow solely responsible for his downfall too, he doubled down, revealing distorted half-truths about my early career, painting my ambition as ruthlessness. My sister, Emma, stood hesitantly in the background, clearly pressured to be there, her eyes pleading with the camera, or perhaps with me. The camera flashes were harsh, blinding. My phone, usually buzzing, went eerily silent as my team, my investors, the entire industry waited to see how I would respond to this public crucifixion. Then, an urgent, coded alert from my bank's security division flashed across my screen. "Hostile takeover attempt detected. Unusual activity targeting controlling shares. Origin, multiple shell core, linked to offshore accounts known to be associated with Martel Miranda." They were trying one last, desperate gamble with phantom money. Publicly, I maintained silence for 24 hours, allowing the accusations to fester, making me appear shaken, perhaps even guilty. The speculation ran rampant. Was I finished? Had Miranda and Victor actually landed a blow? Privately, the final phase of my plan clicked into high gear. I convened an emergency meeting with my core team, Sam and a few other trusted executives I'd gradually brought into the loop. No panic, just calm execution. "It's time," I said simply. We initiated a strategic, limited release of information to select media outlets, carefully curated evidence debunking the specific financial allegations Victor had made, but not addressing Miranda's broader attacks, making it seem like I was selectively responding, perhaps hiding something else. I made myself scarce, appearing to retreat from the public eye, while behind the scenes, I mobilized the powerful, unseen allies I'd cultivated using my future knowledge, influential figures who owed me favors, investors eager to back a winner. Then, a tearful late-night call from Emma. "She's crazy," Emma sobbed. "She's using the last of Victor's hidden funds, something about leveraging offshore accounts, trying to force a buyout. She said she'd rather burn it all down than let you win." Emma's fear, finally outweighing her resentment, provided the final confirmation I needed. "Thank you, Emma," I said softly. "Stay safe." The offshore account Miranda was pinning her hopes on was exactly where I needed it to be. Accessible. But now, thanks to my preemptive legal maneuvers and international banking contacts, completely frozen and traceable directly back to her illicit activities. By morning, Miranda would discover the true meaning of bankruptcy. The final countermove unfolded with chilling precision. My legal team delivered the comprehensive evidence package, recordings, financial trails, witness affidavits, including Liam's, proof of the attempted hostile takeover using illicit funds, to the federal prosecutor's office. Simultaneously, the complex financial maneuver I'd set in motion months ago, a cascade of triggered options and debt conversions executed flawlessly. It didn't just block their takeover, it leveraged their own desperate play against them, transferring controlling interest of Miranda's now worthless company directly to my holding corporation for pennies on the dollar. The linchpin? Arthur Kensington, Miranda's most trusted board member. The one she thought was her staunchest ally. Arthur and I had a secret agreement, forged months ago, based on my knowledge of how Miranda would eventually betray him, too. He provided the crucial internal access needed for the financial takeover. My lawyers filed injunctions, liens, and criminal complaints, boxing Miranda and Victor in completely, ensuring their actions weren't just business failures, but prosecutable offenses. In the quiet, sterile conference room of my law firm, I signed the final documents, the acquisition of Miranda Corp., effective immediately. An hour later, I walked into the lobby of her company headquarters. The building was eerily quiet, the tension palpable. The security guard at the front desk looked up, surprised to see me. I handed him the official acquisition notice and my new owner credentials. His eyes widened as he read the document, his jaw slackening. He looked from the paper to me, then back again. You're the new owner? I found Miranda and Victor in the main boardroom, huddled together, looking pale and defeated. Arthur Kensington stood near the window, his expression unreadable. The moment I walked in, silence fell. Miranda's head snapped up, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and pure hatred. Victor simply stared, looking utterly broken. I walked slowly to the head of the table, the seat she had occupied in my memory of that first betrayal. I placed my briefcase down, the clasps clicking loudly in the silence. Surprised? I asked softly. Miranda's voice was a hoarse whisper. How? How did you know? Every move, every plan. It's like you knew what we were going to do before we did. Victor looked up, a dawning horror spreading across his face as fragmented memories, my subtle warnings, my seemingly passive reactions, suddenly clicked into place. I let the silence stretch, enjoying the dawning comprehension on their faces. I revealed the hidden network of shell corporations I'd built, the vast personal wealth I'd quietly accumulated using my foreknowledge of market shifts, wealth far exceeding anything they imagined. I mentioned my connection to Marcus Thorne, a reclusive, legendary investor who had secretly backed my resurgence, someone Victor had tried and failed to court for years. Thorne believed in Nexus, and more importantly, he believed in me, thanks to a single, perfectly timed investment tip I'd given him based on future events. Miranda's face crumpled. The carefully constructed facade shattered, revealing the raw shock and dawning realization beneath. She finally understood. This wasn't luck. This wasn't just business acumen. This was something else. The fading afternoon sunlight cast long, dramatic shadows across the room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The only sound was the gentle, rhythmic tap of my fingers on the polished mahogany table. Miranda's face was ashen. Victor looked like he might be physically sick. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm, measured, carrying easily in the dead quiet. I've experienced this betrayal before, Miranda. 5 years ago, you, Victor, others, you destroyed everything I built. I paused, letting the words sink in. This time, I finished, my gaze locking with hers, I came prepared. The unraveling was swift, brutal, and public. Miranda Corp officially declared bankruptcy the next day, with my holding company immediately announced as the acquiring entity, tasked with restructuring and salvaging assets. The business world buzzed. Overnight, I went from being the victim of a smear campaign to a strategic mastermind who had orchestrated an incredible comeback. My reputation soared. Victor's consulting firm collapsed within a week as his remaining clients fled. Facing multiple lawsuits and potential criminal charges, he vanished from public life. Emma, bless her conflicted heart, showed up at my apartment, tears streaming down her face, offering a genuine, heartfelt apology. She confessed everything: her jealousy, Miranda's manipulations, her own foolishness. I listened, and then, surprisingly, offered a measured forgiveness. Not absolution, but a path forward, conditional on her actions. Family, I realized, was complicated. Even the betraying parts. Former rivals and allies who had sided with Miranda scrambled to get back in my good graces, sending emails, calling, seeking meetings. I ignored most of them. The most satisfying moment, however, was quiet, almost anticlimactic. From my new office, Miranda's former office, now cleared of her personal effects, I watched through the smoked glass wall as she packed the last of her belongings into a cardboard box. Security guards stood by impassively. She looked small, defeated, lost. She glanced up, her eyes meeting mine across the expanse. There was no fire left, no hatred, just a hollowed-out understanding, a devastating recognition of the true cost of her actions. The look in her eyes was worth every second of the past 5 years of planning. She finally understood what she'd done, and what it had cost her. A week later, her lawyer requested a private meeting. Just Miranda and me, in a neutral conference room downtown. She looked diminished. The expensive clothes hung loosely on her frame. She didn't try to make excuses or accusations. "I just need to understand," she said, her voice barely audible. "How did you anticipate everything? The funding, the investigation, Arthur? It was like you had a script." I considered it. Considered telling her the unbelievable truth about the rebirth. The second chance. But what purpose would it serve? It wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't undo the hurt, the betrayal. It would just sound insane. She tried one last time, appealing to the ghost of our past. "We were friends once. Remember college? Remember those late nights?" I met her gaze, my expression unyielding. The revenge was complete. The anger had cooled, leaving behind a calm, hard clarity. "You once said my success was just luck, Miranda," I replied, my voice quiet but firm. "Perhaps you were right. I was lucky enough to see who you truly are." A month after the dust settled, Miranda requested another meeting. This time she came prepared, not with accusations, but with a carefully rehearsed speech. She stood before me, thinner, paler, but composed. She acknowledged her actions, listed her betrayals, the stolen ideas, the lies, the manipulation of Emma and Victor, the final desperate attack. There was a chilling lack of deflection. "I was driven by insecurity," she admitted, her voice flat, devoid of its usual persuasive cadence. "By jealousy. Seeing your success, it felt like my failure. I convinced myself I deserved what you had." She gestured towards a thick legal document on the table between us. "This transfers the ownership of my remaining personal assets, the condo, the art collection, what's left in my offshore accounts after the legal seizures, to you. It's not enough, I know, but it's all I have left." She looked up, her eyes finally showing a flicker of genuine emotion, not defiance, but a weary remorse born of total defeat. "We had something real once, a real friendship. I destroyed that. I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she paused, taking a shaky breath. "But I'm begging you for a chance to make amends. Any way I can." Victor's attempt came a few days later. He showed up at my new headquarters, the building with my name now emblazoned across the top, carrying an obscenely expensive bottle of single malt scotch, his idea of a peace offering. He didn't apologize, not really, he rationalized. "Look," he started, his voice attempting its old authoritative tone, but undermined by a noticeable tremor. "What happened? It was business. Hard decisions were made. Lines got blurred." He talked about the pressures of the industry, his own financial stress, painting himself as a victim of circumstance rather than a willing participant in betrayal. He even tried to frame his actions as a twisted form of mentorship, suggesting he was testing my resilience. The familiar scent of his expensive aftershave, once reassuring, now seemed cloying, false. "I admit," he conceded, shifting his weight, "I felt overlooked, watching you soar while I felt stagnant. It wasn't personal." He leaned forward, trying to project sincerity. "But I understand your acumen now. You played the game better. I can help you navigate the next phase. I still have connections, influence. I can open doors for you that would take years to access otherwise. Let me help rebuild what I helped destroy." It wasn't an apology. It was a pitch. The encounter with Emma was the hardest. My mother insisted on a family dinner. The tension was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. Emma barely spoke, picking at her food, until Mom gently prompted her. Then, the dam broke. Tears flowed as she talked about growing up in my shadow, the constant comparisons, the feeling of never being good enough. She recounted childhood memories, moments of shared laughter and sibling rivalry, trying to bridge the chasm between us. "Miranda made me feel seen," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "She promised me everything I thought I wanted. I was so stupid, so jealous." Unlike Miranda's calculated remorse, or Victor's self-serving rationalizations, Emma's pain felt raw, genuine. "I've cut ties with both of them," she insisted. "Completely. I'll do anything to prove I'm loyal to you, to family." She looked at me, her expression vulnerable, pleading. "Can you ever trust me again?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Or is our relationship just another casualty of all this?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. My own conflict was palpable. The sting of betrayal versus the pull of familial bonds, the desire for accountability versus the possibility of healing. I arranged one final meeting, not individually, but all three of them together, in the same neutral conference room where I'd last spoken with Miranda alone. Miranda, Victor, Emma. They sat awkwardly, avoiding eye contact with each other. I stood at the head of the table, calm, composed. "I have heard your apologies," I began, my voice even, devoid of accusation or lingering anger. "I have heard your explanations, your offers, your regrets." I looked at each of them in turn. Miranda, watching me with a kind of fearful hope. Victor, attempting a look of dignified contrition. Emma, twisting a napkin in her lap, tears welling again. "You seem to believe that forgiveness is something you are owed, something you can earn back through apologies or gestures or appeals to the past." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "But forgiveness isn't about your needs. It's about my choice. And the trust you broke, it's not something that can be simply repaired." I outlined clear boundaries for the future. No contact, no business dealings, no further attempts at reconciliation. My tone wasn't malicious, just factual, final. "Your actions had consequences," I stated simply. "Permanent consequences." Miranda opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to plead again. Victor started to rise from his chair. Emma just looked down, defeated. Before any of them could utter another word, I delivered the final verdict, the single word that extinguished any lingering hope. No. 1 year later. The view from my office, Miranda's old office, now thoroughly redesigned, was spectacular. Below, the city hummed with energy. My company, rebuilt and expanded on the ashes of Miranda's failed venture and integrated with the fully realized Nexus engine, dominated the market. We weren't just profitable. We were setting the standard for innovation and ethical practice in an industry notorious for cutting corners. The business journals called my turnaround miraculous, my strategy visionary. They didn't know the half of it. My name was on the building now, etched in discreet steel letters above the main entrance. Inside, the atmosphere was different. The cold, competitive edge I remembered from other firms, even my own first company, was gone. We fostered collaboration, encouraged transparency. The fresh smell of polished marble in the lobby wasn't intimidating. It was welcoming. The lighting was warm, designed to calm, not induce stress. Walking the halls, I heard the buzz of productive conversation, the sounds of genuine teamwork spilling from glass-walled meeting rooms. Many of Miranda's former employees now worked for me, their loyalty hard-won through fair treatment and respect, a stark contrast to her reign of fear and manipulation. Sam, now my COO, ran the day-to-day operations with quiet efficiency, her loyalty absolute. Reviewing the quarterly reports, the numbers were indeed satisfying. Record profits, exponential growth. But as I looked out at the sprawling city, I knew, deep down, that the figures weren't what I valued most about this second chance. It was the chance to build something right. The revenge had been meticulously planned, clinically executed. It had provided a necessary closure, cauterized a festering wound. But it hadn't brought joy, only a grim, hollow satisfaction. The real healing began afterward. Untangling the trauma of two timelines, the initial naive trust shattered, the calculated coldness of the revenge required help. My weekly therapy sessions became a non-negotiable part of my schedule. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to unpack the layers of betrayal, anger, and the strange, isolating burden of my rebirth secret. Building new relationships required a different kind of calculus. Trust didn't come easily anymore. I learned to assess character with a more discerning eye, valuing consistency and integrity over charm and ambition. My new circle of friends was smaller, but infinitely more genuine. People who knew my current success but valued the person I was becoming, not just the name on the building. I found myself drawn to mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing not just business advice, but lessons in ethics, warning them about the Mirandas and Victors of the world, hoping to prevent others from repeating my painful experiences. I rediscovered hobbies neglected during the years consumed by planning and executing my revenge sailing, collecting rare books, learning to play the piano badly. In my quiet meditation room, the calming scent of sandalwood candles filled the air as I filled pages of worn leather journals, documenting not business strategies, but the often messy, non-linear journey of healing. The revenge had been satisfying, I wrote one evening, watching the city lights twinkle below. But the peace that followed was the true victory. Rebuilding bridges with Emma was a tentative, fragile process. Forgiveness hadn't erased the scar of her betrayal, but the pull of family remained. We started with awkward coffee meetings, chaperoned by our mother's worried glances. Then came family therapy sessions, uncovering uncomfortable truths about generational patterns of competition and unspoken resentments within our family. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of distrust flaring up. But Emma showed up consistently. She took responsibility. She severed all ties with Miranda's lingering toxic influence. She worked hard to earn back trust, not through grand gestures, but through small, steady actions, honesty, reliability, genuine support. That year's holiday gathering felt different. The usual undercurrent of tension had eased, replaced by a hesitant warmth. Sharing childhood stories around the dinner table, surrounded by the familiar, comforting smell of Mom's roast turkey, the laughter felt less forced, more authentic. Later, I handed Emma a small, plain envelope. Inside wasn't just a card, but seed money, a significant amount for the small, sustainable fashion boutique she'd always dreamed of opening. No strings attached, no expectation of repayment, no request for equity. Just a quiet investment in her future. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of guilt or jealousy. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down." I simply nodded. Second chances weren't just for me. Life has a way of shrinking villains once their power is stripped away. I saw Miranda once, about 6 months after the final refusal. She was working behind the counter at a high-end department store, folding sweaters, her name tag bearing only Miranda. She looked up as I walked past, her eyes widening momentarily in recognition before quickly dropping back to her task. No words were exchanged. There was no triumph in seeing her diminished, just a quiet acknowledgement of consequences. News of Victor reached me through the industry grapevine. He'd apparently suffered some kind of health crisis after the collapse, retired quietly, and moved to a small, remote town somewhere in the mountains. He'd lost everything: his reputation, his wealth, his health. Again, I felt no satisfaction, only a detached sense of an inevitable outcome. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only ashes. When colleagues tried to engage me in gossip about their downfall, I politely shut it down. "Their chapter in my story is closed," I'd say, and mean it. Revenge had provided closure, a balancing of the scales, but celebrating their ruin felt unnecessary, empty. With the past settled, the future opened up. My company thrived, but my focus shifted. Success wasn't just about profit margins anymore. It was about impact. I established a philanthropic foundation, channeling a significant portion of the company's profits into supporting disadvantaged entrepreneurs, particularly women and minorities who often faced the same systemic barriers I'd encountered early on. I started traveling, not just for business, but for pleasure. I bought a small beach house on a remote coast, a place where the only deadline was the tide. The salt spray on my face felt like a baptism. I explored the ancient ruins of Rome, walked the bustling streets of Tokyo, savored the warmth of the Mediterranean sun during a leisurely business trip that felt more like a vacation. I even found myself opening up to the possibility of a real relationship. Sarah, an architect I met at a charity gala, saw past the CEO title. She valued my quiet moments, my vulnerabilities, my passion for books, not just my balance sheet. Sharing a glass of aged whiskey with her on my balcony, watching the city lights, felt more real, more meaningful than any business deal. My first major public speaking engagement wasn't about my company's success, but about resilience, ethics, and the importance of building a business with integrity. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of hopeful faces, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't expected. For the first time since my rebirth, I was actively planning for a future completely unburdened by the past, excited by the possibilities yet to unfold. One evening, sitting on the deck of my beach house, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, I finally understood the true victory. It wasn't destroying Miranda or Victor. It wasn't the money or the company or the industry recognition. The greatest achievement was reclaiming myself. The person I was before the bitterness and betrayal, reforged, stronger, wiser, but not irreparably broken. I opened my journal, the rhythmic sound of waves washing against the shore, a calming soundtrack. What if I had chosen forgiveness back then? What if there was a third timeline, one built on mercy instead of retribution? The thought flickered, intriguing but ultimately academic. This path, the one I'd walked, had led me here, to this moment of peace. The rebirth hadn't just been an opportunity for revenge, it had been a crucible, forcing me to confront my own capacity for darkness and, ultimately, to choose a different way forward after the scales were balanced. The purpose wasn't just vengeance, it was growth. The fading warmth of the sun touched my face. The breeze carried the sweet, clean scent of the ocean, a scent I now associated not with striving, but with arrival. I wrote one last entry for the day, detailing the lessons learned across 2 lifetimes, the corrosive nature of unchecked ambition, the fragility of trust, the unexpected strength found in vulnerability, the quiet power of integrity. Then, I closed the journal, the worn leather cool beneath my fingers. I looked out towards the endless horizon, where the sea met the sky. Some called my journey luck. Others might call it justice. For me, in the quiet solitude of that perfect sunset, I knew it was simply the life I was meant to live all along.